Marcus Smart at the point. Pass stolen by Ingles. Joe's going to the basket, leaves it behind for Ennis. Slam dunk. Nice play by Joe Ingles. Looked to peek over the rearview mirror and found a charging Ennis Canner, and the Istanbul rocks the rim for two.
It is tip-off. The band is back working. Hopefully our audio issues are solved. And share a little story about 14 years ago today. We'll look at the NBA 5, and we'll talk about value in numbers via win probability. What? It's all coming up on today's edition of Tip-Off. Pow. Thank you very much for tuning in. Here's a crazy, quick little story for you. Cheers, by the way. Good morning. I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz. Jazz NBA insider. We do this podcast each and every morning for you. Talk NBA 5 for 5 minutes, then do the rest of the Jazz and some other stuff. You can follow us on Facebook at Locked On Sports or David Locke. You can follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sports. We have a great Google Plus community. A lot of guys are working really hard on that, and I appreciate what they do there. It's a good way to follow all the local Utah sports or the NBA. And that's Locked On Sports. So join in on all those. Thank you. I've got some notes about the audio issues the last few days. Thank you to everybody on that. I'm not sure what it is. I'd be curious. Two things if you could tell me. One is what format you were in. Were you on iTunes? Were you on weareutahjazz.com? And then also tell me if it happens today, because I've reset everything, reloaded the whole programs. Hopefully I fixed it. Here's a quick little story. I got married 14 years ago today on Super Bowl Sunday. I actually got married on Super Bowl Sunday. I think the Super Bowl might have ended. We were in Hawaii. Might not have, too. It was the Ravens-Giants Super Bowl. And the irony of this is that I was a sportscaster in Seattle at the time, as was my wife. And we chose that weekend to go away in Hawaii for our wedding because it was the weekend that we knew we would be free. As sportscasters in Seattle, the way I could miss the fewest Sonics games and the way that she knew she'd be free at her television station was to make Super Bowl Sunday. We knew we wouldn't have to work. How the world changes. Now my wife and daughter leave on Sunday morning to go see the Super Bowl in Arizona in person. So anyway, kind of funny how that happens. All right, let's get this going and dig into the NBA 5.
This is Dante Exum, and you are Locked On Jazz.
Thank you, Dante. Huge win last night for the Bulls over the Warriors without Jimmy Butler, without Mike Dunleavy Jr. They were without Andrew Bogut. By the way, does it bug anybody else if you're listening to a broadcast that the announcer only mentions the player his team is missing? That bugs me. I was listening last night. Only mentioned that Bob only mentioned that they were without Bogut. Never mentioned. I didn't realize they were without Jimmy Butler until I looked into the box score and saw it on my own. Anyway, the Bulls win that. Rose has this weird game, but Gasol and No were huge inside without Bogut. Warriors, who we play Friday, did not hit a three in the second half or overtime. They missed 12 straight. So they should be due to see us on Friday, which is not always good. But that's a good win for the Bulls. They've had such an up-and-down run. They have the talent when it puts in, if they ever get all healthy. Maybe, though, getting healthy and then fighting for possessions is not good for them. I'm not sure. Maybe that's part of the issue for them a little bit. The other one that's interesting right now is that the Cavaliers are really quickly asserting themselves as the favorite in the East. They have not played a particularly difficult schedule right now, but when you start looking at what they've done and I noticed this when we played them the other day. They are 25-12 when LeBron plays. They are 20-5 in LeBron's last 5 games. LeBron is the best player in the NBA still. We can talk about Steph and everybody else, but LeBron, since returning, is 31.7 rebounds, 6 assists, 50% from the field. The way it looks, by the way, if you look at the John Hollinger playoff odds, is Chicago and Cleveland could end up matching up in the first round of the playoffs, 4 or 5. Now, that could also change considerably. Cleveland is projected to win 47, and number 2 seed's 51. So there's a chance that Washington, Cleveland can get all the way to 2, or Chicago gets hot and gets all the way to 2, and then that changes everything. Interesting note on both Hollinger's playoff odds and Wayne Winston's playoff odds that New Orleans is more likely to make the playoffs than Phoenix or Oklahoma City. Not by much. Playoff odds are 42.9%. Phoenix is 42, and Oklahoma City is 41. And it's, I've kind of discounted New Orleans a little bit, but according to looking at this system, they're equally as much a chance. Right now, they're 24-21. Phoenix is 26-20. Oklahoma City is 23-22, and all three are projected to finish at 44-38. So the question is if anybody gets hot, and what happens if they get hot. Jazz are projected at 33 wins to finish the year. I have a hard time thinking we're getting there, by the way. That has us closing the year at 17-20 the rest of the way. Hollinger's odds puts a lot in what you've done your last 15, 20 games, and we have played well. We're 10-10 in the last 20, so I think that might be why, but the schedule changes pretty dramatically on us right away. The other one that's interesting is, for all the talk, and we'll talk about this in a second, but the Clippers' struggles, the Hollinger playoff odds have the Clippers as finishing at 55 wins, puts them as the number 2 team in the Western Conference. Warriors, New Orleans, Clippers, Spurs, Memphis, Dallas, Houston, Portland as your playoff matchups. Interesting in a lot of ways there because of the fact that, I think, and we'll talk about it a little bit here in a second when we talk about the Jazz Clippers tonight. I think the Clippers, who I thought would win, I had as the champions of the West to start the year, might actually be better than people realize. I talked about it a little bit yesterday. We'll talk about it some more today. That is your NBA 5.
Hi, this is Trevor Booker. I want to hear from you. Call 801-200-3738 and ask me a question. That is 801-200-3738 to ask me a question.
I want to dig in a little bit here on a concept called win probability. It's an interesting site. Maybe I'll screen share some of this with you. So there's a site called Predictable, and what they do is that they look at every individual play of the game and then give you if you hit a 3 late, that's a bigger 3 than hitting a 3 earlier, and they give you a win probability for that game and how you played. So, for example, here's the Boston Jazz game of the other night, and the MVP is Tayshaun Prince. The least valuable player is Joe Ingles. Interesting because felt like Joe changed the game, right? Felt like Joe made those steals, got the game going, really impacted the game. This evidently doesn't show that. Tyler Zello was the hero, and the GOAT was Enes Kanter. I thought was really interesting is Rudy Gobert ends up with the best win probability added. So the concept here is that certain points of the game are more important. So if you looked here, and we go here, and all of a sudden here's a big jump. So that is right there is Millsap hit a 25-foot 3, and he added 40% win. The win probability went up 4.5% for the Jazz. Over here, Kanter is fouled. It must be a different play. But there's a jump in win. Or here, Trey Burke hits a 3 to make it 60-56. Our win probability is at 34% at that point of the game. And that shot by Trey added 6% win probability. So then that gives Trey 0.06 points of win probability added, and they break every play down like that. It's a little bit of my point, if you read Empty the Noggin, that the game was really over at halftime, that all the stuff that happened after halftime, while it was nice, it was entertaining, it showed fight, it showed grit and all that, it really actually, the game was over. The win probability for the Jazz was 2.8% when with 2 seconds left when Boston went up 24 points. There was a 2.8% chance that the Jazz actually win this game. Now, that does mean that 2 out of 100 times you can do it, so you keep playing. When Marcus Smart got a defensive rebound when the Jazz went back down 13 in the fourth, the win probability was back down to 3%. So pretty much that whole rally disappeared there, and then the game goes the rest of the way. What's interesting to me about this is, for example, Gordon Hayward, I thought, had a pretty good night. But if you look at win probability, they would say Gordon had a negative 0.03 win probability, and he had what they call garbage time win probability added to the performance during garbage time. So when Gordon made a bunch of his big plays and got the team back in the game, they're referring to that as garbage time. Little questionable in the sense that, well, if he doesn't make those plays, then we don't ever get back in the game to other time, which we eventually do. But it's just at least interesting. And so that's what Joe Ingles had the worst night. Exum favors, and it shows it. It's interesting. So, you know what? Let's go back and look at one or two other games, because I think there'll be 1 or 2 points here that are worth taking a look at. So that was Boston. Let's go take a look at the win against Brooklyn, which I believe was on the 24th. And the more important one I want to compare and show you coming up is Ennis's 2 big nights on the road, because I really thought one of them was really good and one of them was irrelevant. So the MVP of this game was Trey Burke. The hero was Trey Burke. I don't quite understand the difference. Frankly, I'm kind of learning some of this stuff as well. And you can see this one, they're basically saying the same thing. By halftime, when we were up 21, this one was over. There was a 5% win probability. And so then there's not a lot of impact. So Trey's play. Joe Ingles on this night, when he had a bunch of assists, good night, was number 2 on the list. And you run down the box score, and it shows your impact. Let's go and compare the night that. So I thought that Canner's night against Cleveland was empty. We got blown out. He put up a bunch of numbers late. It was nice. Ron's point was, hey, that's still 17 rebounds. So the MVP was Kyrie. The hero, I'll have to try to figure out the difference between these two things. His hero is player with the highest total clutch winning percentage. So this was late game. Joe Ingles was the GOAT, and Trey Burke was the least valuable player. He gets taken out of the starting lineup the next day. And if you look here, this was the night. Ennis ends up with pretty big numbers in this game, but here it is. It's a negative win probability. Doesn't have a major impact on the game. They are saying basically that almost no Jazz player had a positive impact on the game. Mozgov, Kyrie, LeBron did. It has to do with when you make your plays, where you make your plays. And so let's go to the next night where this is where I think this is really valuable, because Ennis had 20 and 15 games back to back. But in my mind, one of those 2015 games was really, really valuable, and the other it wasn't. And here it is. Here in the Milwaukee game, he's both the hero, so his late game final 5 minutes is the best, and Ennis is the MVP with the highest win probability. That's a plus 27.6. That's a big time night right there. If you look, I mean, really, we don't win that game without Ennis. His win probability added is 0.28. That's the highest I've seen just looking at this. Ingles is a 0.04, Elijah's a 0.01, Gobert's a 0.01, Hayward's a 0.01, and Canner's 0.28. I mean, Canner's the hero of this game by a huge margin. Really, 0.28. What night did Clay go off? Was that in between our Brooklyn and our Boston game? No, it was before. It might have been Friday night, the 23rd. Is that the night Clay goes off? Yep, here it is. So here's Clay Thompson's game, and his win probability is plus 46. An unbelievable number. But, of course, here's the spike, and all of these are Klay Thompson making those plays. And that plus 46 might be one of the best games there is all year. So anyway, I think it's just an interesting way to look at the game of who's making plays at what time during the game. And also, to some extent, what I also think is worth noting is something I talk about a lot. Late in games, we get very fired up about players or coaches' moves late, and I'm always like, I don't think they impact the game. there's actually a mechanism here where we can look at this thing and see whether it does so. We also could break down using this unpredictable site whether you shoot a 3 or a 2. A little bit also to our theme of the week, the number 2 win probability added player in the NBA, which should be up on your screen still, is Kyle Korver. Win probability added number 1 is Anthony Davis. Number 2 is Kyle Korver. Number 3 is James Harden. 4 is Jimmy Butler. 5 is Danny Green, the value of the big 3. Lillard is 6. Thompson is 7. Courtney Lee is 8. When is the league going to understand the value of these players? Patrick Patterson stunningly is 9. Wesley Matthews, another 6'7", 8'3" attempt guy. 10. Dirk, 11. Durant, 12. Horford, 13. Pierce, 14, Monte Ellis, 15, Marcus Gasol, 16, Nick Young, 17, Jamal Crawford, 18, Chris Middleton, 19, Markieff Morris, 20, and LeBron, 21. And they probably have a per game aspect here. I thought this was, I haven't done this. I'm going to try this right now for a second. The number 1 garbage time win probability guys in the NBA are Steph, but also Shabazz Muhammad, Brandon Wright. Okay, we can look at this also. We also can look at this here in 1 second on just the Jazz, which I have not done before. So we're doing this live. We'll see this together for the first time. And Gordon Hayward is our win probability number 1 player on the team. Derek Favors is number 2. Enes Kanter is number 3. Rudy Gobert is number 4. Trevor Booker 5. Alec Burks 6. Rodney Hood 7. Jeremy Evans, Jordan Hamilton, Trey Murray, all kind of sit at 0. Steve Novak at 0. Ian Clark, virtually Trey Burke, Dante Exum, and then Joe Ingles. Pretty down on the chart right there as a negative 0.21. So interesting that Ennis, I think we all probably thought there was a chance the way Ennis is that it would fall down a little bit. This may not have a defensive component. To it. It just has blocks and steals, which is part of the flaw of something like this. But it's, it doesn't see a defensive rotation, doesn't necessarily see plus minus. It just sees what you do when you're on the floor, the play you make. It values, it's interesting. Some of these block shots that Rudy gets that we're so excited about don't have the great value if they go out of bounds. The other team gets them. This also would not equate when someone misses a shot because Rudy is there. Rudy's not getting credit for that. So anyway, I thought I think it's a very interesting, our basic numbers in a box score every day are so tremendously flawed that I think that that you have to start looking at some things beyond that. The worst player in the league win probability is Michael Carter-Williams, Rajon Rondo, Josh Smith, Lance Stevenson, Alfred Payton, Zach LaVine, Evan Turner, Matt Dellavedova, Ramon Sessions, Corey Brewer. Interesting, Joakim Noah is at 11. All right. Well, I think that I guess what I would like to make sure. I just think there's I think the Ennis thing was interesting to me, that you can have 23 and 17 one day, you have 22 and 18, and they can be totally different. The Milwaukee game, Ennis was great. The Cleveland game, he just filled in the box score because somebody had to in a blowout. And those are two very different concepts into a game, and I like the fact that statistic looks past it. We'll look more at that. We'll use that more. We might check on our games nightly on that a little bit. Tonight, the Clippers are in town. Does everybody realize some of the things the Clippers are doing? I tweeted some of this late last night, but Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, I thought the Clippers were going to win this thing this year because they had 2 of the 5 best players in the NBA. Well, they still might. Both of them should certainly be All-Stars. Chris Paul's averaging 17 points, 5 rebounds, and 9.8 assists. Since 1970, only Magic, Rod Strickland, and Terry Porter have ever done that. The Clippers are the number 1 offensive team in the league now. They're ahead of Dallas. Seemed inconceivable for a while. Blake Griffin is the key guy on the number 1 offensive team. He's averaging 23 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists a game. Since 2002, only LeBron has done that. And yet, right? So I tell you what, and we talked about it yesterday, J.J. Redick and Matt Barnes are both playing great. If they can get Spencer Hawes to kick in, get a little bit off their bench, they're set. All right, to the questions from Philip. If preseason, if Jeremy Evans and Brock Moden were on the same contract, which do you think would have made the team? Interesting question. Probably Jeremy. You kind of know how he's going to deal with things. He's been around. Brock Moden, they like Brock Moden. They did. I think also to some extent we get so into those conversations at the time, we now see how much any of them play, right? I had this reality the other day that I thought about Brock Moden the other day, and I was like, you can suddenly see how little he actually would have played or had much of an impact. Over under 2.5 Utah Jazz players in the rookie sophomore game on All-Star Weekend. I'm going to go under. I don't think Trey, Rudy, and Dante make it. So I'm going to go under. But over is that all three of them make it. All right, that is tip-off today. I hope you're good. Big stretch for us. We've got 10 games coming up, and they're brutal. Clippers, Warriors, at Portland, Memphis. So the top 4 teams in the Western Conference are our next 4 opponents. At Phoenix, see Ty Corbin in Sacramento on the 7th. At New Orleans on the 9th. And at Dallas on the 11th, before All-Star break. We will play 9 of our next, then we're Portland, San Antonio on the backside. So 9 of our next 10 games are against top 10 teams in the Western Conference. Actually, top 9. And the next 4 are against the 4 best. It'll be fun. We'll have a pretty good idea of who we think is going to win this thing by Thursday's tip-off. Thanks. Appreciate you tuning in.